There is a quiet contradiction inside the human body. The same system that keeps you alive through the night also makes sure you never fully settle into it. Long before beds, before walls, before controlled temperature, the body learned to treat stillness as something temporary, not safe, not final. Comfort was never meant to last, only to come and go in short intervals, just enough to recover, but never enough to fully let go. And even now, in a stable room, on a soft surface, something ancient continues to interrupt that comfort, again and again, without asking. So if nothing is wrong, if the environment is finally stable, then why does your body still refuse to stay at ease for more than a short moment, and why you can't stay comfortable all night? The idea of staying comfortable all night feels natural, almost expected, yet it rests on an assumption that the human body was never built to fulfill. When the body lies still, it does not enter a stable state but a shifting one, where small adjustments quietly unfold beneath awareness. Muscles that seemed relaxed begin to redistribute tension, blood flow changes direction under pressure, and the skin slowly registers the weight of contact points that were invisible just moments before. This process does not signal a problem, but it does prevent stillness from becoming permanent. Long before structured sleeping environments existed, early humans rarely remained in one position for extended periods. The ground was uneven, temperatures were unstable, and the surrounding world required a level of responsiveness that discouraged deep, uninterrupted comfort. In that setting, the body learned to treat stillness as temporary, something to pass through rather than remain inside. Even now, when surfaces are softer and environments more controlled, the internal logic remains. A position that feels neutral at first gradually becomes noticeable, then mildly uncomfortable, prompting a shift that resets the cycle. This is not a failure of modern life to provide comfort, but a continuation of an older pattern where comfort was always brief. The expectation of continuous ease across the night introduces a quiet mismatch between what the body does and what the mind anticipates. When the body moves, it is not necessarily reacting to pain, but to subtle changes in pressure, temperature, and circulation that accumulate over time. Each adjustment is small, often so small it does not reach full awareness, yet together they create a rhythm of movement that defines the night. This rhythm reflects a system designed to stay adaptable rather than fixed. In early environments, remaining too still for too long could increase exposure to cold ground, reduce circulation in compressed areas, or limit the ability to respond to nearby changes. Movement, even minimal, helped maintain balance within these constraints. Over generations, this pattern became part of how the body regulates itself during rest. As a result, comfort is experienced in phases rather than as a continuous state. A position feels right, then gradually less so, then it is replaced. This cycle repeats without needing conscious direction. The surface beneath the body may now be flat and supportive, yet the underlying behavior has not been rewritten. The body continues to scan, adjust, and recalibrate, as if the environment might still shift at any moment. In this sense, discomfort during the night is not an intrusion, but a signal of ongoing regulation. It marks the points where the body transitions from one state of balance to another. The mind may interpret these moments as interruptions, but the body treats them as necessary steps in maintaining function. Over time, this difference in interpretation shapes how the night is experienced. The more the mind expects stillness, the more noticeable each movement becomes. Yet from a biological perspective, the absence of movement would be the unusual state. The body is not resisting comfort, but redefining it continuously. What feels like rest is actually a series of brief alignments, each one temporary, each one part of a longer process that never fully settles. And when this process is viewed not as a disruption but as a pattern shaped across long periods of human history, the question shifts slightly. It is no longer only about why comfort does not last, but about why the body continues to move even when nothing appears to require it. What appears as a simple shift during the night often begins long before any clear feeling of discomfort arises, forming quietly as the body continues to adjust beneath the surface of awareness. When you lie down, weight is distributed across certain areas, usually the shoulders, hips, and parts of the back or legs, depending on position. At first, this distribution feels balanced, almost invisible, but over time, Pressure builds in those same areas as soft tissues compress and circulation adapts to the constant contact. Blood flow does not stop, but it becomes slightly altered, moving around compressed regions, creating small differences in sensation that gradually accumulate. These changes are subtle enough that they do not wake you immediately, yet they are persistent enough to trigger micro-adjustments. The body does not wait for strong discomfort. It responds early, often before the mind fully registers the cause. This pattern reflects a long-standing need to protect tissues from remaining under constant pressure for too long, something that would have been more noticeable on uneven ground or harder surfaces in earlier environments. Instead of allowing one position to dominate, the body cycles through variations, redistributing weight, restoring circulation, and reducing localized strain. Each movement, even the smallest one, is part of a larger system of maintenance that continues throughout the night. In early human settings, this constant adjustment would have been even more necessary. Surfaces were irregular, sometimes firm, sometimes shifting, and rarely designed for comfort. A position that worked for a short time could quickly become less suitable as the ground pressed differently against the body, or as temperature from the earth seeped through. The body adapted by remaining responsive, never fully committing to a single posture. This responsiveness did not require conscious control. It became embedded in the automatic processes that guide rest. Over time, this created a pattern where stillness is always temporary, and movement is expected even when conditions improve. In modern settings, the surface beneath the body may be more even, but the internal system still behaves as if adjustments are necessary. The body continues to scan for imbalances, even minor ones, and responds by shifting position. This is why comfort often fades gradually rather than suddenly. There is no clear boundary where comfort ends and discomfort begins. Instead, there is a slow transition where sensations change enough to prompt movement, even if they never become strong enough to fully wake the mind. This continuous process also explains why the idea of finding a perfect position rarely holds for long. A position can feel ideal in one moment because it aligns well with current pressure and circulation patterns, but as time passes, those patterns change. What was once balanced becomes uneven, not due to any external change but because the body itself is dynamic. Muscles relax further, joints settle slightly, and the distribution of weight shifts in response. The body responds by adjusting again, seeking a new temporary balance. This cycle is not a flaw but a form of regulation, ensuring that no single area remains under strain for too long. In this way, the night becomes a sequence of small corrections rather than a period of complete stillness. Each adjustment is a continuation of a system that developed when the environment demanded constant awareness and flexibility. Even in a quiet, controlled space, the body maintains this pattern not because it fails to recognize safety, but because it operates on a deeper logic shaped over long periods of human existence. The result is a form of rest that is active in subtle ways, where comfort is repeatedly created, experienced, and then replaced. And as this pattern repeats, it begins to reveal that the search for lasting comfort may not align with how the body actually manages itself during the night, raising a quieter question about whether the body is ever meant to remain in one state for long at all. As the night continues, the pattern of small adjustments begins to form a quiet rhythm that rarely reaches full awareness, yet shapes the entire experience of rest. These movements are not random. They follow a sequence influenced by internal timing, shifting pressure, and gradual changes in sensation that unfold beneath the threshold of waking thought. At certain moments, the body moves more easily, almost fluidly, while at other times, it remains still for longer intervals before another adjustment occurs. This variation reflects the deeper structure of sleep itself, where different phases influence how responsive the body becomes to internal signals. In lighter stages of rest, the connection between sensation and movement remains more active, allowing small discomforts to prompt a change in position. In deeper stages, movement is reduced, but not absent. Even then, the body retains a baseline level of responsiveness, enough to maintain circulation and prevent prolonged pressure in one area. This balance ensures that stillness never becomes complete. The body rests, but it does not fully withdraw from its own signals. This ongoing responsiveness can be traced back to environments where full disconnection from the surroundings would have carried risk. Early humans did not sleep in conditions of absolute stability. Sounds, temperature shifts, and subtle changes in the ground required a system that could rest while remaining partially aware. Over time, this created a form of sleep that is layered rather than uniform, where deeper rest coexists with lighter states that allow for adjustment. The result is a night shaped by cycles, each one influencing how the body behaves. When one cycle transitions to another, the body often shifts position, not because something is wrong, but because the internal conditions have changed. A posture that matched one phase may no longer fit the next. Muscles that were relaxed may tighten slightly, joints may settle differently, and the distribution of weight may shift just enough to require a new alignment. These transitions happen without clear signals, blending into the overall rhythm of the night. The mind, if it becomes aware of them, may interpret them as interruptions, but from the perspective of the body, they are part of a continuous process of adjustment. This is why comfort does not extend evenly across the entire night. It rises and falls in relation to these internal cycles. A position that feels comfortable during one phase may feel less so during another, even if nothing external has changed. The body is not seeking a single stable state. It is moving through a series of temporary balances, each one suited to a specific moment within a larger pattern. In early human settings, this flexibility would have allowed for both rest and readiness, ensuring that the body could respond if needed without losing the ability to recover. In modern environments, the same system continues to operate, even when constant awareness is no longer necessary. The bed may remain unchanged, the room may stay quiet, yet the internal rhythm still guides movement. This creates a night where comfort appears and fades repeatedly, shaped not only by physical factors like pressure and temperature, but also by the deeper structure of sleep itself. Over time, this reveals that the body does not treat comfort as a destination to be reached and maintained, but as a series of passing states that align briefly before giving way to the next. And within this steady sequence of alignment and readjustment, the question becomes less about how to remain comfortable and more about why the body continues to move through these cycles even when the environment no longer demands it. When the body enters sleep, it does not switch off in the way it might seem from the outside. Instead, it moves into a state where different systems reduce their activity at different levels, creating a layered condition rather than a single uniform one. Some parts of the brain slow down significantly, especially those linked to focused thought and deliberate attention, while others remain active, quietly monitoring internal signals and the surrounding environment. This uneven slowing creates a form of rest that is partial rather than complete. The body appears still, but internally, processes continue to shift, adjust, and respond. Breathing changes in depth and rhythm, heart rate gradually lowers and then varies, and the muscles never fully lose their capacity to react. Even in deeper stages of sleep, there is no moment where the body becomes entirely disconnected from sensation. This persistent connection plays a central role in why comfort cannot remain constant throughout the night. Because the body continues to register pressure, temperature, and subtle imbalances, it also continues to respond to them. If the body were to fully shut down its responsiveness, it might remain in one position for long periods, but this would come at a cost, reducing circulation in certain areas and increasing strain on tissues. Instead, the body maintains a low level of awareness, just enough to detect when a change is needed. This level is often too faint to reach full consciousness, yet strong enough to trigger movement. The result is a form of rest where adjustments occur without deliberate control. This pattern is not a recent development. In earlier stages of human existence, the ability to remain partially aware during rest likely played a role in maintaining safety. The environment was rarely predictable. Sounds could signal nearby movement, shifts in temperature could affect survival, and the ground itself could change in ways that influenced how the body was supported. A system that allowed complete disconnection would have limited the ability to respond to these changes. Over long periods, the body adapted by maintaining a balance between rest and readiness, never fully committing to one at the expense of the other. This balance can still be observed in the way sleep unfolds today. Even when external conditions are stable, the internal structure of sleep reflects this older pattern. The brain cycles through stages where awareness rises and falls, but never disappears entirely. During lighter phases, the body becomes more responsive, more likely to shift in response to small changes. During deeper phases, responsiveness decreases, yet does not vanish. This ensures that the body can continue to regulate itself, even when the mind is not actively engaged. As a result, the night is not a continuous block of unbroken rest, but a sequence of transitions between different levels of activity. Each transition brings slight changes in how the body experiences pressure, alignment, and comfort. A position that felt neutral during one stage may no longer align with the body's needs during the next. Without conscious direction, the body adjusts, maintaining balance through movement. This continuous interaction between internal monitoring and physical adjustment prevents any single state from lasting too long. Comfort is therefore not something the body holds onto, but something it recreates repeatedly. The expectation of remaining comfortable all night assumes a level of stillness that the body does not support. Instead, the body operates within a system where rest and responsiveness exist together, each one shaping the other. And as this system continues to function in the same way it has across long stretches of human history, the question begins to extend beyond simple discomfort, pointing toward a deeper understanding of why the body never fully lets go, even in the quietest moments of the night. As sleep deepens and then gradually shifts again, the boundary between being fully aware and fully disconnected never becomes absolute, creating a condition where the body continues to process signals even without conscious involvement. During the night, the brain moves through repeating cycles, each one altering how sensitive the body is to internal and external changes. In lighter phases, sensory pathways remain more open, allowing subtle inputs such as pressure, slight discomfort, or changes in temperature to be registered more easily. These signals do not always lead to full awakening, but they often result in small movements that restore balance. In deeper phases, many of these pathways are reduced in activity, yet they are not entirely silent. The body still maintains a baseline level of monitoring, ensuring that essential functions remain stable and that no single condition persists long enough to create strain. This layered responsiveness reflects a system that prioritizes continuity over complete disengagement. Instead of entering a single uninterrupted state, the body moves through a sequence of conditions, each one with its own level of sensitivity and control. This structure makes it unlikely for any single posture or sensation to remain unchanged for extended periods. As one phase transitions into another, the internal conditions that supported a particular position begin to shift. Muscles that were relaxed may regain slight tone, joints may settle into a different alignment, and areas under pressure may signal the need for redistribution. These changes do not require conscious thought. They unfold automatically, guided by systems that have developed to maintain stability over time. In earlier human environments, this capacity would have allowed for rest without losing the ability to respond if necessary. A distant sound, a drop in temperature, or a change in the ground beneath the body could all require some form of adjustment. Remaining partially responsive ensured that the body could react without fully waking, preserving energy while maintaining a degree of readiness. Over long periods, this pattern became part of how sleep is organized, embedding responsiveness into the structure of rest itself. In modern conditions, where external disturbances may be minimal, the same structure continues to operate. The brain does not interpret the absence of immediate threats as a reason to abandon its monitoring role. Instead, it continues to cycle through phases of varying sensitivity, maintaining a consistent pattern regardless of the environment. This is why movements during the night often occur without a clear cause that can be identified upon waking. They are not reactions to obvious discomfort, but responses to subtle shifts that occur as part of the body's internal regulation. The idea of remaining completely still and comfortable assumes a level of uniformity that the body does not support. Instead, comfort is repeatedly adjusted as the brain transitions between states, each one requiring a slightly different balance of pressure, alignment, and temperature. These adjustments are not interruptions of sleep, but expressions of its underlying structure. They reveal that rest is not defined by the absence of movement, but by the presence of controlled, responsive change. Over time, this understanding shifts the perspective on what it means to be comfortable at night. Rather than a single state to be maintained, comfort becomes a sequence of temporary alignments, each one shaped by the phase of sleep the body is moving through. And as this sequence continues, It raises a deeper question about whether the body's need to remain partially aware is not a limitation, but a necessary condition that has always defined how humans rest. As the night moves forward, there are moments when the body seems to come closer to stillness. Yet even in those moments, a quiet layer of monitoring remains in place, shaping what happens next without drawing attention to itself. During certain phases of sleep, especially those associated with deeper rest, the body reduces voluntary movement and limits the influence of conscious control, allowing recovery processes to take priority. Muscles relax more fully, breathing becomes slower and more regular, and the external world fades into the background. However, this does not mean that the body becomes unresponsive. Instead, a different form of awareness takes over, one that is less concerned with deliberate action and more focused on maintaining internal balance. This form of awareness is subtle, almost invisible, yet it plays a continuous role in guiding small adjustments that prevent any single condition from remaining unchanged for too long. When pressure builds in one area, or when alignment begins to shift slightly away from balance, signals are still detected, even if they do not rise to the level of waking perception. The body responds with minimal movement, often so small that it does not interrupt the overall depth of sleep. These movements are not planned or directed. They emerge as part of a system that has learned to regulate itself without requiring full awareness. In earlier human environments, this ability would have allowed for rest that remained flexible, capable of adapting to changes without fully sacrificing recovery. A sudden drop in temperature, a shift in the ground, or a distant sound could all be registered at a low level, giving the body the option to adjust without immediately waking. Over time, this created a pattern where deep rest and partial responsiveness exist together, each one supporting the other. In modern conditions, where such environmental changes may be less frequent, the same pattern continues. The body does not distinguish between a stable room and an unpredictable landscape in terms of its internal structure. It maintains the same layered approach, allowing deep processes to occur while keeping a baseline level of sensitivity active. This is why, even during the most restful parts of the night, complete stillness is rarely maintained for long. Small movements continue to appear, spaced out over time, each one restoring balance in a way that supports ongoing recovery. The expectation that deep sleep should involve total immobility overlooks this underlying system. Instead, deep sleep involves a different kind of movement, one that is quieter, less frequent, but still essential. These movements help maintain circulation, prevent excessive pressure in one area, and allow the body to remain aligned with its changing internal state. Without them, the body would risk holding a position that no longer matches its needs. As a result, comfort during the deepest phases of the night is not a fixed condition, but a series of brief alignments that are maintained through occasional adjustments. Each adjustment is a continuation of the same principle that operates throughout lighter stages of sleep, but expressed more gently. Over time, this reveals that the body never fully abandons its role in monitoring and correcting itself, even when it appears to be at rest. The idea of complete stillness becomes less consistent with how the body actually behaves, and more reflective of how stillness is imagined from the outside. And as this understanding becomes clearer, the question begins to shift again, moving away from the expectation of perfect comfort and toward a deeper curiosity about why the body continues to hold on to this quiet layer of awareness, even when nothing in the environment seems to require it. When the body remains in one position, even on a soft surface, pressure begins to gather in specific areas where weight is concentrated, most often around the shoulders, hips, and parts of the legs or back, depending on how the body is aligned. At first, this pressure is evenly distributed enough to feel comfortable, almost unnoticeable. But over time, the tissues beneath these knockout contacts start to compress. This compression gently alters how fluids move through those regions, especially blood, which must navigate around areas where space has become more limited. The change is not abrupt, and it does not immediately create pain, but it introduces a gradual shift in sensation that the body quietly registers. As circulation adapts, the local environment within the tissue changes as well, influencing how nerves in those areas respond. Signals begin to form, not as clear messages of discomfort, but as subtle indications that the current position is becoming less optimal. These signals are often too faint to wake the mind, yet they are enough to trigger a response at a deeper level. the body begins to prepare for movement before the sensation becomes strong. This early response is part of a system designed to prevent prolonged pressure from affecting tissue health. If a single area were to remain under constant load for too long, circulation could be reduced more significantly, and the tissues could experience strain. To avoid this, the body shifts position, redistributing weight and restoring a more balanced flow. This movement does not need to be large. Even a small adjustment can relieve pressure from one point and transfer it to another, resetting the process. Over the course of the night, this creates a pattern where no single area carries the load continuously. Instead, pressure moves across the body in cycles, each one lasting just long enough to maintain balance before another adjustment occurs. In earlier human environments, where surfaces were often uneven or firm, this process would have been even more pronounced. The ground could create sharper points of pressure, and without cushioning, the body would need to respond more frequently to maintain comfort and circulation. The ability to shift regularly would have helped prevent excessive strain in any one area, allowing rest to continue despite less supportive conditions. Over time, this pattern became part of how the body manages prolonged stillness. Even as sleeping surfaces have changed, becoming softer and more uniform, the internal system that governs pressure and circulation remains the same. The body continues to monitor how weight is distributed and responds when imbalances begin to form. This is why the sense of comfort in one position rarely lasts. It is not that the position suddenly becomes wrong, but that the conditions within the body gradually change as pressure persists. The nerves in compressed areas become more sensitive, circulation shifts, and the body moves to restore equilibrium. This process operates continuously, often without conscious awareness, shaping the experience of the night as a series of small adjustments rather than a single unbroken state. The expectation that comfort should remain constant assumes that the body can hold one configuration without change, but the reality is that the body is always adapting to the effects of its own weight and the surface beneath it. And as this adaptation continues, it reveals that movement is not a disturbance of rest, but a necessary part of how the body maintains it over time. As pressure continues to build in certain areas during the night, the body begins to rely not only on passive sensing, but also on active correction through small, repeated movements that redistribute weight before strain becomes significant. These corrections are guided by a network of sensory receptors embedded in the skin, muscles, and deeper tissues, each one tuned to detect changes in stretch, compression, and tension. When a region remains under steady load, these receptors gradually adjust their response, becoming more sensitive to subtle variations. This increased sensitivity does not immediately translate into discomfort that reaches awareness, but it creates a growing signal that something is shifting away from balance. The body responds by initiating movement, often without involving conscious decision-making. A slight turn of the shoulder, a repositioning of the leg, or a small adjustment in the angle of the spine can be enough to alter how weight is distributed. These movements are usually efficient, targeting the areas where change is needed without disrupting the overall state of rest. Over time, they form a pattern of continuous recalibration, where each position is only temporary, sustained just long enough before the next adjustment begins. This pattern reflects an internal system that prioritizes variability over constancy. In earlier human conditions, variability would have been essential. The ground was rarely uniform, and small shifts in position would have helped the body adapt to uneven surfaces, maintaining stability while preventing excessive pressure in any single location. This constant interaction with the surface beneath the body required a flexible approach to rest, where stillness was brief and movement was expected. The same system continues to operate even when the surface becomes more supportive. Modern bedding can reduce the intensity of pressure in certain areas, but it does not eliminate the need for redistribution. The body still responds to the gradual effects of its own weight, guided by signals that emerge as conditions change over time. As a result, comfort does not remain fixed. It evolves in relation to how pressure is managed across different regions of the body. A position that initially spreads weight evenly may begin to concentrate it as tissues settle, leading to a new set of signals that prompt movement. This ongoing adjustment ensures that no area is left under continuous strain, supporting both circulation and tissue health. The movements themselves are often so subtle that they do not register as interruptions. They occur within the flow of sleep, integrated into its natural rhythm. However, when awareness briefly rises, these movements may be noticed as shifts in comfort, moments where the body seeks a new alignment. The mind may interpret these moments as signs that something is wrong, but from the body's perspective, they are part of a normal process of maintenance. This difference in interpretation can shape how the night is experienced, especially when the expectation of stillness is strong. In reality, the body is not designed to remain unchanged under continuous pressure. It is designed to adapt, to move, and to redistribute, maintaining balance through variation. And as this process repeats across the night, it becomes clear that comfort is not sustained by holding one position, but by allowing the body to adjust whenever internal signals begin to shift. As the cycle of pressure and adjustment continues through the night, the body begins to reveal a deeper pattern, one where movement is not only a response to current conditions, but also a way of anticipating what might happen if those conditions remain unchanged. This anticipation does not involve conscious prediction. Instead, it is built into how the body has learned to manage prolonged contact with any surface over long periods of human history. When a position is held, even if it still feels acceptable, the body does not wait until discomfort becomes clear. It begins to shift earlier, guided by subtle changes that suggest how the situation might evolve if left alone. In this way, movement becomes preventive rather than reactive. A small adjustment made at the right moment can avoid the build-up of stronger signals later, maintaining a smoother progression through the night. This preventive behavior reflects environments where waiting too long to move could have increased strain or reduced the ability to recover efficiently. Over time, this created a system where the body favors early correction over delayed response. The result is a pattern of frequent low-intensity movements instead of rare, larger ones. Each movement redistributes pressure, alters alignment, and resets the conditions within the tissues. This constant resetting prevents any single state from becoming dominant. In modern settings, where surfaces are designed to support the body more evenly, the same principle still applies. The body does not assume that the current position will remain suitable indefinitely. It continues to monitor and adjust, even when the need is not immediately obvious. This can make comfort feel temporary, as if it fades without a clear reason. In reality, the body is maintaining balance by refusing to let any one configuration persist for too long. The idea of staying comfortable all night assumes that the body can find a position that remains optimal across time, but the body operates on a different logic. It treats each position as a temporary solution, useful for a limited period before conditions shift again. This perspective position aligns with a long history of sleeping in environments where change was constant and adaptation was necessary. The ground could vary in firmness, temperature could drop or rise, and the body itself could shift in response to internal processes. In such conditions, the ability to move frequently would have supported both comfort and recovery. Even now, with more stable surroundings, the internal system has not changed. It continues to favor movement as a way of maintaining balance, rather than stillness as a way of preserving it. This creates a night defined by transitions, where each moment of comfort is part of a larger sequence rather than a final state. The body does not resist comfort, but it does not hold on to it either. It allows comfort to emerge, fade, and be replaced, following a rhythm that reflects its underlying design. And as this rhythm becomes more visible, the question of why comfort does not last begins to merge with a deeper understanding of why the body continues to move, even when everything around it appears stable and unchanged. As the body settles into the night, temperature begins to follow its own quiet path, separate from the surface you lie on or the air that surrounds you, creating a gradual drift that influences comfort in ways that are often difficult to notice directly. At the beginning of rest, the body releases heat more easily, allowing internal temperature to lower slightly, which supports the transition into sleep. This cooling does not remain fixed. It continues to change in small increments, guided by internal rhythms that shift across the night. At the same time, the areas of the body in contact with the surface beneath begin to warm through retained heat, while exposed areas may cool more quickly depending on airflow and the surrounding environment. This creates a subtle imbalance, where different parts of the body move toward different thermal states. At first, these differences are small and do not interfere with comfort, but as time passes they begin to accumulate. A region that was neutral may become slightly warm, while another may feel cooler than before. The body detects these changes through receptors in the skin that respond to temperature variation rather than fixed levels. When the contrast becomes noticeable enough, even at a low level, the body responds by adjusting position. A shift in posture can expose a warmer area to cooler air or bring a cooler area into contact with a warmer surface, restoring a temporary balance. This process does not require conscious thought. It unfolds as part of the same system that manages pressure and circulation, using movement to correct small imbalances before they become more pronounced. In earlier human environments, temperature variation would have been even more significant. Without insulation or stable shelter, the ground could draw heat away from the body, while the air could change rapidly over the course of the night. Fire, when present, provided uneven warmth that shifted with distance and fuel. In such conditions, maintaining a stable temperature in one position would have been difficult. The body adapted by remaining responsive, using movement to regulate heat distribution rather than relying on a constant external source. Over time, this created a pattern where thermal comfort was achieved through adjustment rather than stability. Even in modern settings, where bedding and climate control reduce extremes, the internal system continues to operate in the same way. The body does not assume that temperature will remain constant. It continues to monitor small changes and respond when differences begin to form. This is why a position that feels comfortable at one moment may feel too warm or too cool after some time has passed. The change is not sudden but gradual, shaped by the interaction between the body's own heat production and the environment around it. Movement becomes the method through which balance is restored. A slight turn, a repositioning of limbs, or a shift in how much of the body is covered can alter the local temperature enough to create a new sense of comfort. This cycle repeats across the night, with temperature acting as a quiet driver of movement alongside pressure and circulation. The expectation that comfort should remain constant assumes that the body can maintain a fixed thermal state, but in reality, temperature is always in motion, even when the environment appears stable. And as this motion continues, it adds another layer to the pattern of adjustment that defines the night, showing that comfort is not only shaped by how the body is supported, but also by how it exchanges heat with the world around it. As the night continues, the body does not simply cool down once and remain there, but moves through a series of subtle temperature shifts that follow an internal rhythm, creating moments where comfort rises and falls without any clear external cause. This rhythm is tied to how the body regulates heat production and release over time, adjusting in relation to different phases of rest. At certain points, the body produces slightly less heat, allowing deeper cooling, while at other points, small increases in metabolic activity bring a gentle rise in temperature. These changes are gradual and often go unnoticed at a conscious level, yet they influence how the body experiences contact with the surrounding environment. A surface that felt neutral earlier may begin to feel warmer as the body releases less heat, or cooler as circulation patterns shift and expose different areas to the air. The skin plays a central role in detecting these differences, not by measuring exact temperature, but by sensing variation and change. When one part of the body becomes warmer relative to another, or when the overall balance shifts beyond a certain range, the body responds by adjusting position. This response is not immediate or abrupt. It builds slowly, as the contrast becomes more noticeable within the body's internal system. A slight turn can expose a warmer area to cooler air, while bringing a cooler area into contact with retained warmth from the surface. These adjustments help redistribute heat, creating a temporary balance that feels more comfortable. Over time, however, the same pattern repeats, as the internal rhythm continues to shift. In earlier human environments, this interaction between internal temperature and external conditions would have been more pronounced. The absence of consistent insulation meant that the body had to rely on its own regulation to maintain a workable balance. Firelight, when available, created uneven zones of warmth, while the ground and air could draw heat away unpredictably. Movement allowed the body to navigate these variations, shifting between warmer and cooler positions as needed. This adaptability became part of how the body manages thermal comfort during rest. In modern settings, the environment may appear more stable, but the body's internal rhythm has not changed. It continues to cycle through phases of heat production and release, interacting with the surrounding conditions in subtle ways. This is why comfort related to temperature often feels temporary. A blanket that feels appropriate at one moment may feel too warm later, or insufficient as the body's heat output changes. These experiences are not random. They reflect the ongoing interaction between internal regulation and external conditions. The body responds by making small adjustments, sometimes pulling closer to warmth, sometimes moving away from it, maintaining a dynamic balance rather than a fixed state. This process operates continuously, often without full awareness, contributing to the overall pattern of movement that defines the night. The expectation of a stable, unchanging sense of warmth or coolness assumes that the body can hold a constant temperature experience, but in reality, temperature is always shifting, guided by rhythms that do not pause during sleep. And as these shifts continue, they reinforce the idea that comfort is not something the body maintains in a steady line, but something it recreates again and again as conditions change over time. As the night moves toward its later hours, the body is no longer simply reacting to immediate temperature differences, but is instead managing the accumulated effects of many small thermal shifts that have occurred across time, creating a more complex and layered experience of comfort that continues to evolve even in a stable environment. Each position held earlier in the night leaves behind a subtle thermal trace, where certain areas have retained more heat while others have gradually cooled, forming an uneven internal map that the body continues to read and adjust. This map is not fixed. It changes with circulation, with contact against the surface, and with the body's own internal rhythms that alter how heat is produced and released. As blood flow shifts, warmth is redistributed, sometimes bringing heat into areas that were previously cooler, and sometimes allowing heat to dissipate from regions that were once insulated by contact. These changes are slow and often too subtle to notice directly, yet they influence how the body interprets comfort at any given moment. A position that once felt balanced may begin to feel slightly off, not because of a clear external change, but because the internal distribution of heat has shifted just enough to alter the overall sensation. The body responds to these differences through movement, using small adjustments to rebalance how heat is experienced across the skin and deeper tissues. A slight turn may expose a warmer surface to cooler air, while bringing a cooler area into contact with retained warmth, creating a new temporary equilibrium. This process reflects a system that has learned to manage temperature, not by holding it constant, but by continuously redistributing it in response to ongoing change. In earlier human environments, this approach would have been essential for maintaining a workable level of comfort through the night. Without consistent shelter or insulation, the body had to rely on its own ability to detect and respond to shifting thermal conditions. The ground could draw heat away steadily, while the air could cool or warm depending on time and weather. Fire, when present, introduced uneven zones of warmth that required frequent repositioning to use effectively. In such conditions, remaining in one place for too long would have led to increasing imbalance, either through heat loss or accumulation. Movement allowed the body to navigate these gradients, finding temporary comfort through adjustment rather than stability. Over long periods, this behavior became embedded in the way the body regulates itself during rest. Even now, when external conditions are more controlled, the same internal logic continues to operate. The body does not assume that comfort will remain once it is achieved. It continues to monitor the distribution of heat and responds when differences begin to emerge. This is why temperature-related discomfort often appears gradually, without a clear beginning. A position that felt neutral earlier may begin to feel slightly too warm or too cool, prompting a shift that restores balance for a time. This cycle repeats, layered on top of the adjustments driven by pressure and circulation, creating a night defined by continuous, low-level change. The expectation of a stable and unchanging sense of comfort assumes that all of these factors can remain fixed, but in reality, they are constantly interacting and influencing one another. The body moves not because something has gone wrong, but because change is always occurring, even when it cannot be easily perceived. And as this ongoing process continues through the final stages of the night, it becomes clearer that comfort is not a state the body reaches and holds, but a condition it recreates again and again, shaped by patterns that have been carried forward across long stretches of human history. As the night unfolds, the mind does not disappear in the way it might seem, but shifts into a different mode where awareness becomes fragmented rather than absent, creating moments where the body continues to be quietly observed even without conscious thought. This partial awareness does not involve clear thinking or deliberate attention, but it allows certain signals to pass through more easily than others. Sensations related to pressure, temperature, and internal imbalance can still be detected at a low level, shaping how the body responds during rest. The brain does not treat sleep as a complete withdrawal from the world. Instead, it maintains a selective form of monitoring, where only certain types of information are allowed to influence behavior. This selectivity reflects a long-standing pattern where remaining completely unaware could have carried risks in earlier human environments. Sounds, changes in light, or shifts in the surrounding space could all require a response, even during rest. Over time, the brain developed a system where it could reduce activity while still preserving the ability to detect meaningful changes. This system continues to operate even when external conditions are stable. During the night, the brain cycles through phases where this partial awareness becomes more or less active. In lighter stages, the boundary between sleep and wakefulness becomes thinner, allowing more signals to pass through. A slight increase in pressure, a change in temperature, or a small shift in body alignment may be enough to trigger movement. In deeper stages, the threshold for awareness becomes higher, but it does not disappear completely. The brain still allows certain signals to influence the body, especially those related to maintaining internal balance. This creates a continuous interplay between rest and responsiveness, where the body remains connected to its own condition even when the mind is not actively engaged. As a result, comfort during the night is influenced not only by physical factors, but also by how the brain filters and interprets incoming signals. A sensation that might go unnoticed in one phase of sleep may become more apparent in another, leading to a shift in position. These shifts do not always lead to full awakening. Instead, they occur within the flow of sleep, guided by changes in how awareness is structured at that moment. This pattern reflects an adaptive system where the body is never completely left unattended. In earlier human settings, this would have allowed for rest that remained flexible, capable of responding to changes without losing the ability to recover. The brain did not need to fully wake to initiate a small movement or adjustment. It could operate at a level where action was possible without complete awareness. This same structure persists in modern sleep. Even in a quiet, controlled environment, the brain continues to alternate between states of higher and lower sensitivity, allowing the body to respond to internal signals as they arise. This is why moments of discomfort or the need to shift position often appear without a clear cause. They are shaped by changes in how the brain is processing information at that time, rather than by a single external factor. The expectation of remaining fully comfortable assumes that the brain can maintain a constant level of filtering throughout the night. But in reality, this filtering changes continuously. Each phase brings a different balance between awareness and rest, influencing how the body experiences its own condition. And as these phases repeat, they contribute to the pattern of movement and adjustment that defines the night, showing that comfort is not only shaped by the body itself, but also by how the mind remains quietly involved even when it seems to be at rest. As the brain continues to move through its cycles during the night, the way it filters incoming signals does not remain constant, and this shifting filter quietly changes how the body experiences the same physical conditions over time. Rather than acting as a fixed gate, the brain adjusts the threshold at which sensations are allowed to influence movement, creating periods where the body is more responsive, followed by periods where it becomes less sensitive to the same inputs. This process is not random, but tied to how different regions of the brain alternate in activity across the night, shaping the balance between rest and responsiveness. In phases where sensitivity is slightly increased, small signals from the body begin to carry more weight. A mild pressure in the shoulder, a slight change in temperature along the skin, or a gradual shift in alignment can reach the level where the body initiates a movement. These signals are often still too weak to produce full awareness, yet they are strong enough to guide a quiet adjustment. In phases where sensitivity is reduced, the same signals may continue to exist, but they do not lead to movement. The body remains still for longer, not because the conditions are perfectly balanced, but because the brain is temporarily filtering out those minor imbalances. This alternating pattern creates a dynamic experience of comfort, where the same position can feel stable at one moment and subtly misaligned at another, even though the physical situation has not changed significantly. The difference lies in how the brain is interpreting incoming information at that time. This explains why movements during the night can appear to happen without a clear cause. From the outside, nothing has changed, yet internally, the threshold for response has shifted just enough to allow certain signals to pass through. When they do, the body adjusts, redistributing pressure, altering temperature contact, and restoring a temporary sense of balance. Over the course of the night, this pattern repeats many times, creating a sequence where comfort is briefly established, then gradually replaced as the brain's filtering system moves into a new state. In earlier human environments, this shifting sensitivity would have been an important feature of survival. A system that could occasionally increase responsiveness allowed the body to detect subtle changes in the surroundings, such as movement nearby or shifts in environmental conditions, without requiring full wakefulness. At the same time, periods of reduced sensitivity allowed deeper rest to occur without constant interruption. This balance between openness and filtering became part of how human sleep is structured, allowing both recovery and adaptability to exist together. Even in modern conditions where external disturbances are limited, the same system remains active. The brain continues to cycle through these variations in sensitivity, applying the same pattern regardless of whether it is needed. As a result, the experience of comfort is shaped not only by the physical state of the body, but also by the timing of these internal changes. A position that feels comfortable may not lose that quality because of a clear external factor, but because the brain has shifted into a state where certain signals are now more noticeable. The body responds in the same way it always has, through small adjustments that restore balance for a time. Over the full span of the night, this interaction between physical conditions and shifting perception creates a continuous pattern of movement, reinforcing the idea that comfort is not something the body maintains in a steady line, but something it revisits repeatedly as internal thresholds change and new signals are allowed to guide the next adjustment. As the night progresses through its final cycles, the brain's pattern of partial awareness does not simply repeat in the same way, but becomes shaped by everything that has already occurred, creating a state where past adjustments influence how new signals are interpreted and responded to. The body is not starting from a neutral point each time it shifts. Instead, it carries forward the effects of previous positions, pressure changes, and temperature variations, forming a layered context that the brain continues to process. This means that a signal emerging later in the night is not evaluated in isolation, but in relation to what has already been experienced. A slight pressure in one area may feel more noticeable not because it has increased significantly, but because that region has already been under load in earlier positions. Similarly, a small change in temperature may stand out more clearly because the surrounding areas have been cycling through warmth and cooling for some time. The brain integrates these accumulated patterns, adjusting its sensitivity in response to both immediate input and recent history. This integration creates a form of awareness that is dynamic and continuously updated, rather than fixed or static. As a result, the body's responses during the later parts of the night often reflect a combination of current conditions and lingering effects from earlier phases. Movements become part of a longer sequence, each one influenced by the adjustments that came before it. In earlier human environments, this ability to carry forward information would have helped the body remain efficient in how it responded to ongoing changes. Rather than reacting to each signal as if it were new, the brain could adapt its responses based on recent patterns, conserving energy while still maintaining flexibility. Over time, this created a system where sleep is not only divided into phases, but also connected across time, with each phase influencing the next. In modern conditions, the same process continues, even when the environment remains stable. The brain does not reset its perception at each moment. It builds upon what has already been experienced, shaping how new signals are interpreted. This is why comfort can feel progressively less stable as the night goes on. It is not simply a matter of external factors, but a reflection of how the body accumulates and processes information over time. Each adjustment brings temporary relief, but also contributes to the overall pattern that influences future responses. The expectation of finding a single position that remains comfortable assumes that the body evaluates each moment independently. But in reality, the body operates within a continuous flow where past and present are linked. This creates a night where comfort is always relative, shaped by both current conditions and the sequence of adjustments that have already taken place. As this process unfolds, it becomes clear that the body is not seeking a final, stable state, but is instead managing a continuous stream of small changes, each one influencing the next. And as this ongoing interaction between memory, sensation, and response continues, it leads to a deeper understanding that the experience of comfort is not only about what is happening now, but also about how the body carries forward the imprint of everything that has already occurred. When looking back across long periods of human history, the environments in which people rested were rarely stable, and this instability played a quiet but persistent role in shaping how the body learned to sleep, move, and respond through the night. Early human groups did not have access to controlled indoor spaces, insulated bedding, or consistent surfaces. Instead, they rested on ground that could vary from firm soil to uneven terrain, sometimes covered with natural materials that shifted under weight rather than holding a fixed shape. This meant that the body was almost never supported in a perfectly even way. Small differences in elevation, texture, and density created points where pressure gathered more quickly, encouraging frequent adjustments. At the same time, the surrounding environment remained in constant motion. Temperature could change gradually as night deepened, airflow could shift with subtle movements in the landscape, and sounds could emerge without warning. In such conditions, remaining completely still for long periods would not have aligned well with the need to stay physically balanced and minimally responsive. The body adapted by developing a pattern of rest that included regular movement, not as a disruption, but as part of how stability was maintained. These movements were not large or deliberate. They were small, often barely noticeable, yet frequent enough to redistribute pressure, adjust to surface changes, and respond to environmental variation. Over many generations, this pattern became embedded in the way the body organizes rest. Sleep did not evolve as a state of total stillness, but as a condition where stillness and movement exist together, each supporting the other. The presence of other individuals also contributed to this dynamic. Early humans often rested in groups, where proximity provided warmth and a degree of safety, but also introduced additional variability. The movement of one person could subtly influence the position of another, and shared surfaces could shift under combined weight. This created a setting where complete stillness was even less likely, and where the body needed to remain adaptable. Even without direct contact, the awareness of nearby movement could influence how deeply one settled into a single position. Over time, this social aspect of rest reinforced the idea that sleep is not an isolated, static experience, but one shaped by interaction with both the environment and other bodies. In modern settings, many of these external variables have been reduced or controlled. Surfaces are designed to be even, temperatures are regulated, and disturbances can be minimized. Yet the internal patterns that developed in response to earlier conditions remain largely unchanged. The body continues to behave as if variability is expected, maintaining a readiness to adjust even when the need is less obvious. This is why comfort does not remain fixed, even in environments that seem perfectly stable. The body is not only responding to current conditions, but also operating according to patterns shaped over long periods of adaptation. Movement during the night reflects this deeper history, where flexibility and responsiveness were necessary for maintaining balance. Rather than seeking a single position to hold, the body continues to move through a sequence of temporary alignments, each one suited to a moment before conditions, internal or external, begin to shift again. And as this perspective becomes clearer, it suggests that the difficulty of staying comfortable all night is not simply a feature of modern life, but a continuation of how the human body has always learned to rest within a world that was rarely still. As these early environments continued to shape human rest over long periods of time, the body did not simply adapt to a single type of surface or condition, but to constant variation, where no two nights were exactly the same and no single posture could reliably remain suitable for long. The ground itself could change from one location to another, sometimes firm and compact, other times loose or uneven, and often influenced by moisture, vegetation, or the presence of natural debris. A surface that felt stable at the beginning of the night could shift slightly as weight settled into it, altering how pressure was distributed across the body. This meant that comfort was always provisional, dependent on conditions that could change without warning. At the same time, the wider environment introduced additional layers of variability. Air movement could increase or decrease, affecting how heat was retained or lost. Subtle changes in weather could influence temperature gradients across the body, especially in exposed areas. Even the presence of nearby animals or the sounds of movement in the distance could influence how deeply one settled into rest, encouraging a level of responsiveness that prevented complete stillness. In such conditions, the body learned to treat sleep as a flexible process rather than a fixed state. Movement became a way of maintaining alignment with changing circumstances, allowing the body to adapt continuously rather than relying on a single stable position. Over generations, this created a system where the expectation of constant comfort did not align with the realities of the environment. Instead, comfort was experienced in short intervals, each one shaped by a temporary balance between the body and its surroundings. This pattern was reinforced by the fact that early human groups often moved frequently, changing locations in response to resources, climate, and other factors. Each new setting introduced a different combination of surface conditions, temperatures, and environmental signals, preventing the development of a single, consistent sleeping pattern. The body adapted by becoming more responsive rather than more dependent on stability. It learned to adjust quickly, using small movements to maintain balance across a wide range of conditions, even as tools and materials were later introduced to improve comfort, such as simple coverings or prepared resting areas. The underlying pattern remained. These additions could reduce extremes, but they did not eliminate variability. The body continued to operate according to the same principles, maintaining a readiness to adjust whenever conditions began to shift. In modern environments, where surfaces are more uniform and conditions are more controlled, this deep pattern of adaptability is still present. The body does not assume that stability will persist indefinitely. It continues to monitor for small changes and responds when they occur, even if those changes are minimal. This is why the sense of comfort during the night often feels temporary, as if it fades without a clear cause. In reality, the body is following a pattern that was shaped in environments where change was constant and responsiveness was necessary for maintaining balance. Each movement reflects this history, not as a direct response to the present environment alone, but as part of a system that expects variability and prepares for it continuously. And as this expectation remains embedded in the body, it helps explain why the search for a perfectly stable position rarely succeeds, even when the surrounding conditions appear calm and unchanging. As these patterns of variability and constant adjustment continued across many generations, they did not remain tied only to specific places or conditions, but became part of a more general way the body approaches rest, carrying forward an expectation that change is always possible even when the environment appears stable. This expectation is not something the mind actively considers, but something the body expresses through its behavior during the night. When lying down, the body does not fully commit to the idea that the current position will remain suitable. Instead, it maintains a quiet readiness to adapt, shaped by a long history where surfaces shifted, temperatures changed, and surroundings could not be assumed to remain constant. This readiness influences how the body distributes weight, how it monitors temperature, and how it responds to even small variations in sensation. Over time, it creates a pattern where stillness is always provisional, held briefly before giving way to movement that restores balance. In earlier human environments, this approach would have allowed for a form of rest that remained flexible, capable of adjusting to a wide range of conditions without requiring full awareness or deliberate action. A slight unevenness in the ground, a gradual cooling of the air, or a subtle change in posture could all be managed through small, automatic movements that kept the body aligned with its surroundings. These movements were not interruptions, but part of the process of maintaining stability within a changing context. As human groups moved across different landscapes, from open terrain to more sheltered areas, the need for this adaptability remained consistent. No single environment provided the same conditions night after night, reinforcing the importance of a system that could respond continuously rather than rely on fixed solutions. Even as certain forms of shelter began to appear, offering some protection from external changes, they did not eliminate variability entirely. The body continued to experience shifts in pressure, temperature, and alignment, maintaining the same pattern of adjustment that had developed earlier. In modern settings, where many external factors have been reduced or controlled, this deeply embedded pattern does not simply disappear. The body still behaves as if conditions may change, continuing to monitor and respond even when there is no clear external reason to do so. This creates a quiet tension between the stability of the environment and the adaptability of the body. The surface may remain unchanged, the temperature may stay consistent, yet the body continues to move, redistributing weight, adjusting to internal signals, and maintaining balance through variation. This ongoing movement reflects not a failure to achieve comfort, but a continuation of a system that was shaped to function in a world where comfort was never guaranteed to last. Over the course of the night, this system expresses itself through a series of small transitions, each one reflecting the body's ongoing effort to remain aligned with both its internal state and its expectations of change. And as this pattern repeats, it suggests that the difficulty of staying comfortable all night is not simply a modern inconvenience, but a reflection of how the human body has learned, over long periods of time, to rest within an environment that was always shifting, even when it appeared still. When considering how the human body interacts with the surface it rests on, it becomes clear that the idea of a perfectly supportive, unchanging base is a relatively recent development, while the body itself was shaped over long periods in contact with surfaces that were far less consistent and often irregular. Early humans did not sleep on materials designed to evenly distribute weight or maintain a stable shape. Instead, they rested on ground that responded to pressure in uneven ways, sometimes firm, sometimes slightly yielding, and often influenced by natural elements such as soil composition, plant matter, or small variations in terrain. This meant that the body was never fully supported in a uniform way. Certain areas would carry more weight than others, and these points could change subtly as the body settled or as the surface shifted beneath it. Over time, this created a pattern where the body did not expect to remain in a single, perfectly aligned position. Instead, it learned to adjust continuously, responding to small imbalances as they emerged. The spine, joints, and muscles adapted to a range of positions rather than a single ideal alignment, allowing for flexibility rather than rigidity. This flexibility was not about achieving comfort in the modern sense, but about maintaining function across changing conditions. A position that worked for a short period might gradually become less suitable, as pressure built or as the surface beneath shifted slightly, prompting the body to move and find a new temporary balance. This pattern became part of how the body manages rest, creating a system where comfort is linked to variation rather than constancy. In addition, the materials that might have been used to soften the ground, such as leaves, grass, or animal skins, were not fixed structures. They compressed, shifted, and lost their shape over time, further contributing to the need for ongoing adjustment. Even when these materials provided some cushioning, they did not eliminate the uneven distribution of pressure. Instead, they created a surface that changed gradually, requiring the body to respond as those changes occurred. In modern environments, the introduction of structured bedding has altered the external conditions, providing surfaces that are more stable and designed to support the body more evenly. However, the internal systems that developed in response to earlier conditions have not been fully replaced. The body continues to behave as if the surface may shift or become less suitable over time, maintaining a readiness to adjust even when the surface remains unchanged. This can create a subtle mismatch between expectation and experience. A bed may be designed to provide consistent support, yet the body does not fully settle into a single position. It continues to shift, redistributing weight and seeking new alignments as if responding to changes that are no longer present in the same way. This behavior reflects a deeper pattern where the body is not optimized for a single, fixed surface, but for a range of conditions that require ongoing adaptation. As a result, the search for a position that remains comfortable throughout the entire night often does not align with how the body is structured to respond. Instead, comfort emerges through a sequence of positions, each one lasting for a time before the body moves again. And as this sequence continues, it highlights the idea that the surfaces the human body was shaped to rest on were never designed to support stillness for long, but to be navigated through movement and adjustment. As the body continues to rest on surfaces that are designed to feel stable and supportive, it does not simply adapt by becoming still, because the internal systems that guide posture and comfort were not built around stability as a permanent condition, but around continuous adjustment within changing contact. Even when a mattress appears to hold its shape, the interaction between the body and the surface is not static. The weight of the body gradually compresses materials over time, and even small variations in how different areas respond can lead to subtle shifts in alignment. The shoulders may sink slightly deeper than the hips, or the lower back may settle into a different curve as muscles relax further, creating a new distribution of pressure that did not exist at the beginning of the night. These changes are not flaws in the surface, but natural outcomes of sustained contact, and the body continues to interpret them through systems that were shaped in far less predictable environments. In earlier human conditions, surfaces did not just compress slightly, they could change in more complex ways, shifting under weight, redistributing support unevenly, or gradually losing structure as materials flattened. The body adapted by developing a constant readiness to respond, treating every position as temporary and subject to change. Over time, this created a pattern where stillness was not trusted to remain appropriate, and movement became the default response to any gradual shift in support. Even now, when the external surface is engineered to reduce these variations, the internal pattern does not disappear. The body still monitors for small differences in pressure and alignment, and when it detects them, it responds with movement, even if the surface itself has not changed significantly. This creates a subtle mismatch between the intention of modern design and the behavior of the body. A bed may aim to provide consistent support, but the body does not interpret consistency as a signal to remain in one position. Instead, it continues to adjust, redistributing weight and exploring new alignments as if responding to conditions that are no longer present in the same way. This behavior reflects a deeper structure where the body is not optimized for a single perfect position, but for the ability to move between many positions as conditions evolve. The idea of finding a position that remains comfortable throughout the entire night assumes that the body can remain unchanged while in contact with a stable surface. But in reality, both the body and the surface are dynamic. Muscles relax progressively, joints shift slightly, and internal systems continue to regulate pressure and circulation, all of which influence how the body is supported over time. The result is a continuous interaction where comfort is not maintained by holding one position, but by allowing the body to adjust whenever small imbalances begin to form. Over the course of the night, this leads to a sequence of movements that reflect not instability, but ongoing regulation. Each adjustment restores a temporary balance, aligning the body with its current state rather than forcing it to remain in a previous one. And as this pattern continues, it becomes clear that the surfaces the human body was shaped to rest on did not encourage stillness, but required constant adaptation, a pattern that remains active even when the surface itself no longer demands it. As the body continues to interact with the surface beneath it through the final part of this pattern, it becomes clearer that what feels like a search for a perfect position is not truly a search for permanence, but a continuous negotiation between the body's internal state and the way support is experienced over time. Even when a position initially feels balanced, the body does not interpret that balance as something to hold indefinitely. Instead, it treats it as a temporary alignment that will gradually change as muscles relax further, as tissues settle, and as the distribution of weight shifts in response to both internal processes and sustained contact. This gradual change is often too subtle to notice directly, yet it alters how the body is supported in ways that accumulate over time. A position that once allowed even distribution may begin to concentrate pressure in certain areas, not because the surface has failed, but because the body itself is changing within that position. The spine may adopt a slightly different curve, the joints may settle deeper into the surface, and the surrounding muscles may release tension unevenly, all of which contribute to a new configuration that no longer matches the earlier sense of balance. The body detects these changes through continuous feedback, and it responds in the only way it has consistently done across long periods of human history, by adjusting position. This adjustment is not an attempt to find a final solution, but a way of maintaining balance within a system that is always evolving. In earlier environments, this approach would have allowed the body to remain functional despite surfaces that could not be relied upon to provide stable support. Movement ensured that no single alignment persisted long enough to create strain, and that the body could adapt to the gradual changes occurring beneath it. Over generations, this pattern became part of how rest is managed, embedding a preference for variation rather than constancy. In modern conditions where surfaces are more predictable, the same internal logic continues to operate. The body does not fully shift into a mode where stillness is maintained simply because the environment allows it. Instead, it continues to behave as if change is expected, responding to the smallest variations in support as they arise. This creates a night where comfort is experienced in segments, each one linked to a particular alignment that remains suitable only for a limited time. The expectation of maintaining a single comfortable position assumes that the body and the surface can remain aligned without change. But in reality, both are continuously interacting and influencing one another. The surface responds to the body's weight, and the body responds to how that response evolves, creating a feedback loop that prevents any one state from lasting indefinitely. As this loop continues, movement becomes not a disruption, but a necessary part of maintaining comfort across time. Each shift resets the conditions, allowing a new balance to form which will again change as the night progresses. And within this ongoing sequence, it becomes increasingly clear that the human body was never designed to remain still on a single surface for extended periods, but to move through a range of positions that reflect both its internal dynamics and the history of the environments in which it learned to rest. As the body rests within the presence of others, even without direct contact, the experience of comfort begins to shift in subtle ways, shaped not only by internal processes and the surface beneath, but also by the shared environment that multiple bodies create together. Throughout much of human history, sleeping alone in complete isolation was not the most common pattern. Early human groups often rested in close proximity, whether for warmth, safety, or social structure, and this proximity introduced a layer of variability that influenced how the body behaved during the night. The presence of other individuals meant that the environment was never entirely still. Small movements from one person could transfer through the ground or shared surface, creating faint disturbances that others would detect at a low level. These disturbances were not necessarily disruptive enough to cause full awareness, but they were sufficient to influence the body's ongoing adjustments. A slight shift nearby could lead to a subtle repositioning, not because of discomfort in the usual sense, but because the body registered a change in its surroundings. Over time, this created a pattern where rest was not an isolated process, but one that remained connected to the movement of others. In addition to physical disturbances, the shared thermal environment also played a role. Multiple bodies resting together would influence how heat was distributed, creating zones of relative warmth and cooler edges that changed gradually as positions shifted. A person closer to others might experience a different balance of heat compared to someone more exposed, and as these relationships changed, the body would respond by adjusting position to maintain a comfortable state. This added another layer to the pattern of movement, where adjustments were not only driven by individual factors such as pressure and circulation, but also by the presence and behavior of others. Even without direct awareness, the body remained responsive to these shared conditions. In earlier human settings, this responsiveness would have been beneficial, allowing individuals to remain aligned with the group while maintaining their own comfort and readiness. A change in the group's position, a movement within the shared space, or a shift in collective warmth could all influence how each individual body settled into rest. Over generations, this created a system where sleep was shaped not only by individual needs, but also by the dynamics of shared space. In modern environments, where many people sleep alone or on isolated surfaces, this social component is reduced, but not entirely absent. The body still carries patterns shaped by long periods of shared rest, maintaining a level of responsiveness to environmental change even when that change is minimal. This can contribute to the ongoing adjustments that occur throughout the night, as the body continues to behave as if it is part of a shared system rather than a completely isolated one. The expectation of remaining perfectly comfortable assumes that the body operates independently of its surroundings, but in reality, it remains influenced by patterns that include interaction with others. As a result, comfort is not only shaped by the individual body and its contact with the surface, but also by the subtle ways in which shared environments have influenced how the body organizes rest. And as this influence continues to appear in the form of small, repeated adjustments, it adds another dimension to the understanding of why stillness is rarely maintained for long, even when external conditions seem quiet and unchanged. As the night continues within a shared context, even when that context is no longer physically present in the same way, the body does not fully shift into a mode of complete independence, but instead carries forward a pattern where responsiveness to others remains embedded at a low level, quietly influencing how rest unfolds. This influence is not something the mind actively recognizes, yet it shapes how easily the body settles and how often it adjusts position. Over long periods of human history, rest was rarely an isolated experience. Sleeping near others meant that the body learned to remain loosely connected to its surroundings, maintaining a form of awareness that extended beyond individual sensation. This created a system where the boundary between self and environment during sleep was not clearly defined. Instead, the body operated within a shared field of subtle signals, where even minimal changes could influence behavior. As a result, the brain developed a tendency to remain partially open to external input, even when no immediate response was required. This openness does not disappear in modern conditions. Even when a person sleeps alone in a quiet space, the internal structure that supports this responsiveness continues to function. The brain does not fully close itself to the possibility of external change. It maintains a baseline level of sensitivity, allowing small signals to be registered and at times combined with internal cues to trigger movement. This can create a situation where the body adjusts position without a clear internal reason, as if responding to something beyond its own state. In reality, it is responding to a system that expects shared conditions even when they are no longer present. This expectation influences how comfort is experienced. A position that feels stable may still be interrupted by a subtle adjustment, not because the body has detected a strong imbalance, but because it remains open to change as a general condition. In earlier human environments, this openness would have allowed individuals to remain aligned with group dynamics, maintaining a form of coordination that supported both safety and cohesion. Small movements could ripple through a group, creating patterns of adjustment that kept individuals loosely synchronized without requiring conscious effort. Over time, this pattern became integrated into the structure of sleep itself, embedding a level of responsiveness that extends beyond purely internal regulation. In modern settings, where the social aspect of rest is often reduced, this embedded responsiveness does not simply switch off. The body continues to behave as if it is part of a larger system, even when that system is no longer physically present. This contributes to the ongoing pattern of movement during the night, adding another layer to the adjustments driven by pressure, temperature, and internal rhythms. The expectation of complete stillness assumes that the body can operate in isolation, but in reality, it carries forward patterns shaped by shared environments, where responsiveness to others was part of how rest was maintained. As this pattern continues to appear in the form of small, repeated adjustments, it becomes clear that the difficulty of remaining comfortable all night is not only about the body itself, but also about the lingering influence of how humans have historically rested together, within environments where complete separation from others was rarely the norm. As the body moves through different stages of life, the way it experiences rest and comfort during the night does not remain fixed, but gradually shifts in response to changes in recovery, tissue structure, and internal regulation, creating a pattern where the same position that once felt neutral may no longer remain comfortable for as long. In earlier stages of life, the body often adapts more easily to sustained positions, as tissues recover more quickly from pressure and circulation adjusts with less resistance. Muscles tend to maintain a balance between tension and relaxation that allows the body to remain in one alignment for longer periods without triggering the need for adjustment. Over time, however, this balance begins to change. The process is not abrupt, but gradual, reflecting shifts in how the body manages load, distributes pressure, and restores equilibrium. Connective tissues may respond differently to sustained compression. Circulation may take slightly longer to redistribute in areas under pressure, and muscles may hold or release tension in less uniform ways. These changes do not prevent rest, but they alter how long any single position remains suitable. As a result, the body begins to rely more on movement as a way of maintaining comfort, adjusting position more frequently to avoid the accumulation of imbalance. This pattern reflects a broader principle where the body does not maintain a single mode of rest across all stages of life, but adapts its behavior in response to internal changes that unfold over time. In earlier human environments, these differences would have been present as well, though expressed within the same conditions of variable surfaces and shared spaces. Individuals of different ages resting within the same group would not have experienced the night in exactly the same way. Some might remain in one position longer, while others would shift more frequently, each pattern reflecting the current state of the body rather than a single universal model of comfort. This variation would have contributed to the overall movement within the group, reinforcing the idea that rest is not uniform, but shaped by both individual and collective factors. In modern settings, where the external environment may be more controlled, these internal differences become more noticeable. The expectation of remaining comfortable all night often assumes that the body will respond in the same way regardless of age or condition. But in reality, the ability to sustain a single position changes gradually over time. This can lead to a perception that comfort has decreased, when in fact the body is simply relying more on adjustment as a way of maintaining balance. Movement becomes more frequent not because something is wrong, but because the internal conditions that support stillness have shifted. Each adjustment redistributes pressure, restores circulation, and realigns the body in response to its current state. Over the course of the night, this creates a pattern where comfort appears and fades more quickly, requiring repeated repositioning to maintain a sense of ease. And as this pattern reflects deeper changes within the body itself, it suggests that the experience of not staying comfortable all night is not only shaped by external factors, but also by how the body evolves over time, carrying forward the same underlying system of adjustment while applying it in slightly different ways across different stages of life. As the body continues to change across different stages of life, the pattern of adjustment during the night becomes not only more frequent, but also more dependent on how multiple internal systems interact with one another over time, especially those involved in circulation, muscle tone, joint alignment, and sensory processing. These systems are closely linked, and even small shifts in how one operates can influence the others, gradually altering how long the body can remain in a single position before initiating a movement. In earlier stages of life, circulation tends to adapt more quickly when pressure is applied, allowing blood to reroute with minimal delay and preventing the buildup of subtle signals that would otherwise prompt repositioning. Muscles also tend to maintain a more even balance between tension and relaxation, supporting the body without creating uneven loading across different areas. Joints, in this state, are often more responsive to micro-adjustments, allowing alignment to shift naturally without creating localized strain. As the body changes over time, this coordination becomes less uniform. Circulation may respond more slowly in areas under sustained pressure, leading to small differences in how tissues are supplied and how quickly those areas recover. These differences are not immediately noticeable, but they accumulate gradually, creating a background of mild imbalance that the body continues to monitor. At the same time, muscle tone may become less evenly distributed. Some areas may retain tension longer, while others relax more quickly, altering how weight is shared across the body. This uneven distribution changes the points where pressure gathers and how quickly those points begin to signal the need for adjustment. Joint behavior also shifts in subtle ways, with alignment becoming slightly more dependent on surrounding muscle support, making certain positions less stable over time, even if they initially feel comfortable. Sensory processing adds another layer to this pattern. The way the body detects and interprets signals from the skin and deeper tissues may change, affecting how quickly a position begins to feel less suitable. Signals that might have remained below the threshold for response in earlier stages may now reach that threshold more easily, leading to more frequent adjustments. This does not necessarily mean that discomfort is stronger, but that the body becomes more responsive to smaller changes. In earlier human environments, these differences would have existed within the same shared conditions of uneven ground, shifting temperature, and group rest. Individuals at different stages of life would have responded to these conditions in their own way, with some maintaining positions longer and others adjusting more frequently. This variation would have contributed to a collective pattern of movement, reinforcing the idea that rest is shaped by both individual physiology and shared environment. In modern settings, where external conditions are more stable, the influence of these internal changes becomes more apparent. The expectation of remaining comfortable in a single position assumes that the body can maintain consistent responses across time. But as these systems shift, that consistency becomes less reliable. Movement becomes the primary method through which balance is maintained, allowing the body to compensate for slower circulation adjustments, uneven muscle response, and changing joint alignment. Each repositioning redistributes pressure, restores local balance, and allows different areas to recover, creating a rotating pattern that supports overall stability. Over the course of the night, this results in shorter intervals of comfort, each one shaped by the current internal state, rather than by a fixed external condition. And as this pattern continues, it reveals that the experience of not staying comfortable all night is not simply a matter of the surface or environment, but a reflection of how the body's internal systems gradually change and interact over time, influencing how rest is maintained through continuous adaptive movement. As the night progresses toward its later hours, the accumulated effects of these internal changes begin to shape not only how often the body moves, but also how it chooses to move, creating a pattern where each adjustment reflects both immediate conditions and the longer sequence of positions that have already occurred. The body does not treat each movement as an isolated event. Instead, it carries forward a kind of physical memory, where areas that have already experienced pressure or strain are less likely to be used in the same way again without a period of recovery. This does not require conscious awareness. It is built into how tissues respond to sustained contact and how the brain interprets signals over time. As a result, later movements in the night are often influenced by earlier ones, creating a shifting map of preferred and avoided positions that continues to evolve. A region that has been under pressure for a longer period may become more sensitive to even small amounts of additional load, prompting the body to redistribute weight more quickly when that area is engaged again. At the same time, areas that have had time to recover may be used again, but not in exactly the same way, as alignment and muscle tone have already shifted through previous adjustments. This creates a continuous cycle where the body rotates through positions, not randomly, but in response to a changing internal landscape that reflects its recent history. In earlier human environments, this pattern would have supported efficient use of the body during rest, allowing different areas to share the load over time while preventing prolonged strain in any single location. The uneven ground and variable conditions would have made this rotation even more important, reinforcing a pattern where no single position dominated for long. Over generations, this behavior became part of how the body organizes rest, embedding a preference for variation that continues to operate even when external conditions are more stable. In modern settings, where the surface remains relatively constant, the influence of this internal rotation becomes more visible. The body continues to cycle through positions, not because the surface demands it, but because the internal distribution of pressure, circulation, and recovery is always changing. This leads to a form of comfort that is dynamic rather than fixed, where each position feels appropriate only within a certain window before the underlying conditions begin to shift. The expectation of finding a position that remains comfortable throughout the entire night assumes that the body can maintain a stable internal state over time, but in reality, that state is always evolving. Each adjustment changes the conditions for the next one, creating a chain of movements that reflect both the present and the immediate past. As the night continues, this chain becomes more pronounced, with the body relying on movement not only to respond to current signals but also to manage the effects of previous positions. This reveals a deeper structure where rest is maintained through ongoing redistribution rather than through stillness. And as this process unfolds, it becomes clear that the inability to remain comfortable in one position is not a failure of the body, but a reflection of how it balances pressure, circulation, and recovery across time, using movement as a continuous method of maintaining equilibrium within a system that never fully stops changing. As the body settles onto a modern bed, there is an immediate sense of stability that suggests comfort should be easier to maintain, yet this stability introduces a subtle mismatch between what the surface provides and how the body has been shaped to respond over long periods of time. A modern bed is designed to reduce variation, to hold the body in a consistent alignment, and to distribute weight in a way that minimizes pressure points. On the surface, this appears to solve the conditions that once required constant adjustment. However, the body does not simply accept this stability as a new default. Instead, it continues to operate according to patterns formed in environments where surfaces were never fully predictable. This creates a situation where the body is placed on a surface that encourages stillness, while its internal systems continue to expect change. When the body lies in one position on a stable surface, the initial distribution of weight may feel balanced, but over time, small internal shifts begin to appear. Muscles relax further, allowing the body to settle slightly deeper into the surface. Joints adjust their angles as surrounding tissues release tension. Circulation adapts to the areas under sustained pressure, gradually altering how blood flows through compressed regions. None of these changes are dramatic, but together they create a slow transformation of the original alignment. On a surface that does not change in response, these internal shifts become the primary source of imbalance. The body senses these changes and responds in the same way it always has, by adjusting position to restore a temporary balance. In earlier environments, the surface itself would have changed along with the body, creating a more dynamic interaction where both elements contributed to ongoing adjustment. In contrast, a modern bed remains relatively constant, which means the body must carry the full responsibility for adaptation. This increases the frequency of movement, not because the surface is inadequate, but because the body continues to seek variation within a stable system. Over time, this can create the impression that the bed is the source of discomfort, when in reality, it is the difference between external stability and internal variability that drives the need for adjustment. The body is not designed to remain in a single fixed configuration for extended periods. It is designed to move through a range of positions, each one redistributing pressure and allowing different areas to recover. A surface that reduces external variability does not eliminate this need. Instead, it highlights it, making the internal processes more noticeable. This mismatch becomes even more apparent when considering that the body's regulatory systems, including those governing pressure, temperature, and circulation, continue to operate independently of the surface. They create changes that require response, even when the environment remains unchanged. In this context, comfort is not determined solely by the quality of the bed, but by how the body interacts with a surface that does not evolve in the same way it once did. The expectation that a stable surface should lead to uninterrupted comfort assumes that the body can adapt to stillness, but in reality, the body continues to generate the need for movement from within. As a result, the night becomes a sequence of adjustments driven by internal changes rather than external ones. And as this sequence unfolds, it reveals that the challenge of staying comfortable all night is not simply about finding the right surface, but about understanding how a body shaped for variability responds when placed in an environment that offers stability without change. As the body continues to rest on a surface that remains stable throughout the night, the absence of external change begins to shift more responsibility onto internal systems, which must now generate variation on their own in order to maintain balance. In earlier environments, variation came from both the body and the ground beneath it, creating a shared process where adjustments could emerge from either side of the interaction. The surface might compress unevenly, shift slightly, or respond differently across areas of contact, allowing the body to redistribute pressure without needing to initiate as many movements. In contrast, a modern bed is designed to resist such change, maintaining a consistent shape and level of support regardless of how long the body remains in one position. This consistency reduces external disturbance, but it also removes a source of natural variation that the body once relied on. As a result, the body must compensate by increasing its own activity at a subtle level, creating movement where the environment no longer provides it. This does not mean larger or more noticeable movement, but rather a steady pattern of micro-adjustments that keep the system from becoming too fixed. Over time, this internal generation of variation becomes more apparent. A position that initially feels stable may begin to feel slightly misaligned, not because the surface has changed, but because the body has continued to evolve within that position. Muscles release tension unevenly, joints settle into slightly different angles, and circulation adapts to areas under pressure, all of which contribute to a gradual shift in how support is experienced. Without external change to redistribute these effects, the body must create its own reset through movement. This leads to a cycle where each position is held for a time, then replaced as internal conditions move away from balance. In earlier human settings, this cycle would have been supported by the environment itself. The ground might have shifted just enough to relieve pressure, or the natural materials beneath the body might have redistributed weight without requiring active movement. This interaction reduced the need for constant repositioning driven solely by the body. In modern conditions, where the surface remains unchanged, the body takes on a more active role, maintaining balance through continuous adjustment. This can create a perception that the body is less comfortable on stable surfaces, when in reality it is simply operating without the environmental support it once had. The expectation that a consistent surface should lead to consistent comfort overlooks the role that variability once played in supporting rest. The body is not only adapted to stability, but to change itself, using variation as a way to prevent the buildup of pressure and imbalance. When that external variation is removed, the internal system continues to function, but it must work alone, leading to a more noticeable pattern of movement. Over the course of the night, this pattern becomes a defining feature of rest, where comfort is maintained not by remaining still, but by allowing the body to introduce small changes whenever internal conditions begin to shift. And as this process continues, it highlights a deeper aspect of the mismatch between modern environments and the body's long history, showing that the absence of change can require more effort to manage than change itself. As the night moves into its later stages, the contrast between a surface that remains stable and a body that continues to change internally becomes more pronounced, revealing a pattern where comfort is repeatedly reshaped not by the environment, but by the body's own ongoing processes. At the beginning of rest, the alignment between the body and the surface may feel balanced, with weight distributed in a way that minimizes noticeable pressure. However, this balance does not remain fixed. Over time, muscles continue to relax beyond their initial state, allowing the body to settle slightly deeper into the surface. Joints adjust their angles as surrounding tissues release tension, and the spine may shift subtly as different areas bear more or less load. These changes are gradual and often too small to notice directly, yet they alter how the body is supported. Because the surface does not change in response, these internal adjustments become the primary source of variation. The body senses that the original alignment no longer matches its current condition and initiates a movement to restore a temporary balance. This movement redistributes weight, relieving areas that have been under sustained pressure while engaging others that have had time to recover. The new position feels comfortable for a time, but the same internal processes continue, leading to another gradual shift and another adjustment. In earlier human environments, this cycle would have been shared between the body and the ground. The surface itself could compress, shift, or adapt in response to weight, helping to redistribute pressure without requiring as much active movement. Natural materials such as soil, leaves, or animal skins did not hold a fixed structure. They responded to the body in ways that introduced continuous variation, allowing balance to be maintained through both external and internal changes. In contrast, a modern bed is designed to resist such variation, maintaining a consistent level of support throughout the night. This consistency reduces large disturbances, but it also removes a layer of adaptability that once worked alongside the body. As a result, the body must take on the full role of adjustment, generating variation internally to compensate for the stability of the surface. This does not mean that the bed is ineffective, but that it operates differently from the environments in which the body's patterns were formed. The expectation that a stable surface should provide uninterrupted comfort assumes that the body can remain in a fixed state when external conditions do not change. In reality, the body continues to evolve within any position it takes. Circulation adapts to areas under pressure, gradually altering how tissues are supplied. Muscle tone shifts unevenly as some areas relax more than others, and small differences in alignment begin to emerge. Each of these changes influences how the body experiences contact with the surface, creating a need for adjustment even in the absence of external variation. Over the course of the night, this leads to a sequence of movements that reflect the body's effort to maintain balance within a system that is constantly changing from within. Comfort becomes something that is repeatedly created and released, rather than held in a steady state. Each adjustment provides a moment of alignment that matches the body's current condition. But as that condition continues to change, the alignment must also change. This process does not stop, even when the environment remains the same. Instead, it reveals a deeper pattern, where stability in the surroundings highlights variability within the body. And as this pattern continues through the night, it becomes clear that the challenge of staying comfortable all night is not simply a matter of finding the right surface, but of understanding how a body shaped by long periods of environmental variation responds when placed in conditions that no longer provide that variation from the outside, requiring it to generate change from within in order to maintain equilibrium. As the body continues through the night, there is a deeper pattern that becomes more visible, one that goes beyond pressure, temperature, or surface interaction, and reflects a more fundamental tendency to resist remaining completely still for extended periods of time. This tendency is not simply a reaction to discomfort, but part of how the body maintains internal balance across multiple systems that continue to operate even during rest. When the body remains in one position, muscles do not all relax in the same way. Some areas release tension quickly, while others retain a low level of activation, creating small differences in how support is maintained. These differences are not immediately noticeable, but they influence how the body is aligned and how weight is distributed. Over time, this uneven pattern begins to shift, leading to a gradual change in posture that the body detects and responds to. Movement becomes the way to restore a more balanced state, even if the initial position felt comfortable. At the same time, circulation continues to adjust to sustained contact. Blood flow is redirected around areas under pressure, and while this process allows the body to remain in position for a time, it does not remain optimal indefinitely. Small imbalances begin to form, creating subtle signals that encourage repositioning. These signals are often below the level of conscious awareness, yet they are sufficient to trigger movement. In earlier human environments, this tendency to move would have been reinforced by the need to remain adaptable within changing conditions. Remaining completely still for long periods could have reduced the ability to respond to environmental changes or increased the strain on specific areas of the body. Movement allowed for both physical maintenance and a level of readiness, even during rest. Over time, this created a pattern where stillness was never absolute, but always part of a larger cycle of adjustment. In modern settings, where external conditions are more stable, this internal tendency does not disappear. The body continues to resist prolonged stillness, not because the environment requires it, but because internal systems continue to change over time. Muscles shift in their level of activation, joints adjust in response to surrounding tissues, and circulation responds to sustained pressure. Each of these processes introduces small changes that gradually move the body away from its initial alignment. Movement becomes the way to respond to these changes, maintaining balance through variation rather than through constancy. This creates a night where stillness is always temporary, held for a period before giving way to adjustment. The expectation that the body should remain still once it finds a comfortable position assumes that internal systems can remain unchanged, but in reality, they are continuously active, even during rest. As a result, the body does not settle into a single state, but moves through a sequence of positions that reflect its ongoing need to adapt. And as this pattern continues, it suggests that the inability to stay comfortable all night is not simply a matter of external conditions, but a reflection of a deeper principle, where the body maintains equilibrium not by remaining still, but by allowing continuous, subtle movement to redistribute load and support its internal processes across time. As the body continues through the night, the tendency to avoid prolonged stillness becomes more closely tied to how different internal systems coordinate over time, especially those involved in maintaining posture, regulating muscle tone, and preserving joint alignment. These systems do not operate in a fixed state, even during rest. Instead, they remain active at a low level, continuously adjusting in response to subtle changes within the body. When the body lies in one position, muscles do not simply switch off. They shift between states of relaxation and minimal activation, maintaining enough engagement to support the structure of the body while allowing for recovery. This balance is not perfectly uniform. Some areas may relax more quickly, while others retain a slight level of tension, creating small imbalances in how the body is held. Over time, these imbalances influence how weight is distributed, gradually altering the alignment of joints and the overall posture. The body detects these changes and responds by adjusting position, restoring a more balanced distribution of tension and support. This process is continuous, not because the initial position was incorrect, but because the internal conditions that supported it have changed. Joint alignment plays a central role in this pattern. When a position is held, joints are maintained by the surrounding muscles and connective tissues. As these tissues adjust, the stability of the joints can shift slightly, making the position less optimal over time. The body responds by moving into a new alignment that better matches its current state. This movement is often small and does not require conscious effort, yet it is essential for maintaining comfort and preventing the buildup of strain. In earlier human environments, this need for ongoing adjustment would have been reinforced by external conditions. Uneven ground, variable support, and changing surroundings would have made it difficult to maintain a single position without some degree of movement. The body adapted by integrating movement into the structure of rest itself, creating a system where stillness was always temporary and adjustment was expected. In modern settings, where surfaces are more stable, the same internal processes continue to operate. The body does not fully transition into a mode where stillness is maintained simply because the environment allows it. Instead, it continues to adjust in response to its own internal changes, maintaining balance through movement. This creates a pattern where comfort is not defined by the absence of movement, but by the presence of ongoing regulation. Each adjustment redistributes tension, realigns joints, and restores a temporary balance that reflects the current state of the body. Over the course of the night, this leads to a sequence of positions that change gradually, each one lasting for a time before being replaced. The expectation of remaining in a single comfortable position assumes that muscle tone, joint alignment, and internal balance can remain constant, but in reality, these systems are always shifting. Movement becomes the way the body responds to this shifting, ensuring that no single alignment persists long enough to create imbalance. And as this process continues, it reinforces the idea that the body is not designed to remain fixed but to maintain stability through continuous subtle adjustment, even when the external environment remains unchanged. As the night continues into its final cycles, the body's resistance to prolonged stillness becomes less about any single system and more about how all internal processes overlap in time, creating a continuous need for redistribution that cannot be resolved by holding one position indefinitely. Pressure, circulation, muscle tone, joint alignment, and temperature do not change in isolation. They influence one another in subtle ways, forming a network of small adjustments that gradually alter the overall state of the body. When one element shifts, it affects the others, and this chain of influence slowly moves the body away from the balance it initially held. A position that once felt stable begins to change from within, not because the environment has altered, but because the internal conditions supporting that position have evolved. As pressure builds in one area, circulation adapts, which in turn affects how tissues respond. As muscles release or retain tension unevenly, joint alignment shifts slightly, which then redistributes weight across different regions. Temperature differences may develop between areas of contact and exposure, adding another layer of variation. None of these changes are strong enough on their own to create immediate discomfort, yet together they form a gradual drift away from equilibrium. The body detects this drift through a combination of sensory signals, many of which remain below conscious awareness. In response, it initiates movement, not as a reaction to a single problem, but as a way of restoring balance across multiple systems at once. This movement resets the distribution of pressure, improves circulation in previously compressed areas, realigns joints, and alters how heat is exchanged. The new position provides a temporary state where these systems are again in relative balance, but only for a limited time. The same processes continue, and the cycle repeats. In earlier human environments, this continuous redistribution would have been supported by external variability, where the ground and surroundings contributed to the shifting of conditions. The body and environment worked together, each introducing change that helped prevent any single state from becoming fixed. In modern settings, where the environment remains more constant, the body carries the full responsibility for maintaining this variation. This makes the pattern of movement more noticeable, as it becomes the primary way balance is preserved. The expectation that the body should remain still once it finds a comfortable position assumes that all internal systems can remain aligned without change. But in reality, alignment is always temporary. The body is not designed to hold a single configuration across time. It is designed to move through a sequence of configurations, each one responding to the current state of multiple interacting systems. As the night unfolds, this sequence becomes the foundation of rest itself, where comfort is maintained not by stillness, but by continuous adjustment. Each movement is part of a larger process that ensures no area remains under strain for too long and that internal balance is preserved across changing conditions. And as this pattern continues through the final hours of the night, it reveals that the inability to stay comfortable all night is not a limitation, but a reflection of how the body sustains itself, using movement as a constant method of maintaining equilibrium within a system that never fully stops changing. As the night continues toward its final stretch, the meaning of comfort begins to settle into something quieter and less fixed, revealing that what the body is actually maintaining is not a stable state, but a moving balance that depends on constant, almost invisible change. Each position that feels comfortable does so only because, at that moment, multiple systems briefly align in a way that reduces strain and distributes load in a manageable way. Yet this alignment is never designed to persist. Pressure continues to build, circulation continues to adapt, muscles continue to shift in tone, and temperature continues to move across the surface of the body. These processes do not pause simply because a comfortable position has been found. Instead, they continue beneath it, slowly altering the conditions that made that position feel right. As a result, comfort begins to dissolve not as a sudden loss, but as a gradual drift, where the same position becomes slightly less aligned with the body's current state. The body responds to this drift not by resisting it, but by moving through it, adjusting position to create a new alignment that better fits the present conditions. This adjustment restores a sense of ease, but only temporarily, because the same internal processes continue to operate. Over the course of the night, this creates a pattern where comfort is experienced in waves, each one rising as alignment improves and falling as internal conditions change. In earlier human environments, this pattern would have been inseparable from the surrounding world. The ground, the air, and the presence of others all contributed to a constantly shifting context, making it unlikely that any single state could remain unchanged. The body adapted by treating comfort as something that must be revisited rather than preserved, allowing movement to serve as the bridge between one moment of balance and the next. In modern conditions, where the environment appears stable, this deeper pattern remains, even though the external need for it has diminished. The body continues to operate as if change is inevitable, maintaining a readiness to adjust even when nothing obvious has shifted. This creates a quiet tension between expectation and reality. The expectation is that comfort should be maintained once it is achieved, but the reality is that the body does not define comfort in that way. It defines it as a temporary condition that reflects a specific alignment at a specific moment in time. As time passes, that alignment changes, and the body moves to match it. This movement is not a failure to remain comfortable, but the very process through which comfort is maintained across time. Without it, pressure would accumulate, circulation would become less balanced, and strain would increase in specific areas. Movement prevents this by redistributing load and allowing different parts of the body to recover in sequence. Over the full span of the night, this creates a continuous cycle where no single position dominates, and no single moment defines the experience of rest. Instead, rest becomes a process of ongoing adjustment, where the body maintains balance not by holding still, but by allowing change to occur and responding to it as it unfolds. And as this understanding settles, the question of why comfort does not last begins to shift into something else entirely, suggesting that the body is not trying to keep comfort in place, but to move through it in a way that allows it to return again and again, each time shaped by the conditions that exist in that moment, never identical, yet always part of the same quiet rhythm that carries the body through the night. As the night reaches its final moments, the pattern that has been quietly unfolding begins to reveal its full meaning, not as a problem to be solved, but as a way the body sustains itself through time, where comfort is never meant to be held in place, but to be revisited in a continuous flow that supports recovery without allowing any single state to dominate. The body does not move because it fails to find the right position. It moves because no position can remain right as internal conditions continue to change. Pressure shifts as tissues settle, circulation redirects as areas remain in contact, muscles adjust their tone as they alternate between support and release, and temperature continues to move across the surface of the body. Each of these processes introduces small variations that gradually alter the alignment that once felt balanced. The body responds not by resisting these changes, but by moving with them, allowing each adjustment to restore a temporary state of equilibrium. This creates a sequence where comfort appears, fades, and returns again, not as repetition, but as a series of unique moments shaped by the current state of the body. Over the course of the night, this sequence becomes the structure of rest itself. Rather than remaining still to preserve comfort, the body allows comfort to emerge through movement, using change as the mechanism through which balance is maintained. In earlier human environments, this pattern would have been inseparable from the conditions of the world. The ground shifted, the air changed, and the presence of others introduced constant variation, making it impossible for any single state to remain unchanged. The body adapted by developing a system that did not depend on stability, but on the ability to adjust continuously. This system remains active even in modern settings, where the environment appears controlled and predictable. The body continues to behave as if change is always present, maintaining a readiness to respond even when no clear external signal exists. This reveals a deeper principle, where rest is not defined by the absence of movement, but by the presence of controlled, responsive change that allows the body to maintain equilibrium across time. The expectation of staying comfortable all night assumes that the body can find a final state that remains valid from beginning to end. But the body does not operate within that kind of static framework. It operates within a dynamic one, where each moment of comfort is linked to the next through a process of ongoing adjustment. And as this process continues, it suggests that the experience of not staying comfortable is not something to be corrected, but something to be understood as part of how the body works. The quiet movements that occur during the night are not interruptions of rest, but the very actions that make rest possible, redistributing load, restoring circulation, and maintaining balance in a system that never fully stops changing. When viewed in this way, the question at the beginning begins to soften. The body is not refusing comfort. It is redefining it moment by moment, allowing it to exist as something that returns again and again, rather than something that can be held without change. And in that quiet rhythm of appearing and fading, of adjusting and realigning, the night becomes less about holding onto a single state, and more about moving gently through many, until rest is carried forward not by stillness, but by the continuous, careful balance that the body maintains without needing to be fully aware of it, leaving behind a final question that no longer asks how to stay comfortable, but wonders whether comfort was ever meant to stay at all.